A good horror game is something special. It is able not just to challenge us with its gameplay or tell a good story, but to scare us, to haunt our dreams and idle thoughts, even to make us question our own perceptions of reality. In this podcast, we meet the developers of both existing popular horror titles and hotly anticipated upcoming ones to discuss how they do it, what inspires them, and all things spooky and unnerving. Welcome to Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. Hello, and welcome to Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. I'm Phil, and joined by Will as the co-hosts and co-founders of the awards. And today, we're grateful to be joined by Rafał Sankowski, who is the mastermind behind Holstin, which is an upcoming horror game which we want to talk about today. So, first of all, thanks for coming along. It's an honor.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So we'll get into talking about Holstin itself in a second, because obviously there's a lot to talk about there as in terms of what that offers to the genre as a game and everything. But the way we like to kind of start these things off is by asking people to talk about what kind of made you a fan of horror in the first place.
Do you mean horror in general, or just, Holstin is more of a survival horror? I actually have like two answers based on your question. I've just before we started the podcast, the video, I said that I'm going to drink some water, and I see I drank it rapidly. But so I'm not sure what brought me into horror. Like, I am into horror, and I have trouble, saying the word in English, as you can hear. But I think, and that's not a horror per se, but the most scary movie I think I saw, and that was the most scary movie for me, was The Wall, the movie about Pink Floyd. And it's not a horror, it's like a human drama, but for a kid that was really scary. And I was, and psychedelic, and all that stuff, and I was really into being afraid. And I think the first horror movie would be Ring, the first one, the Japanese one, and it's one of my favorite horror movies, than The Shining, I would say.
Yeah.
And in terms of survival horror games in general, I used to play a lot of video games with my family, and one of the first games, the free games we bought along the with the PSX were Tekken 3, Vagrant Story, which is like my one of my favorite games of all time, and a big inspiration to Holstin, and Resident Evil 3. And I have fond memories of playing, whole nights with my parents, Resident Evil 3, and we played this game for like, I don't know, like 4 months, because we weren't into like gaming. I was like 6, or maybe 5. They weren't really, that isn't something you should do as a parent, I think.
No.
But yeah, we played that game for so long because I was a kid, and I didn't actually play the game, and I was just watching my parents playing Resident Evil 3, and I was really into Resident Evil.
Yeah. No, I think you see that with when we're talking to obviously a lot of different people about horror games. They seem to all have like the same different story of how they've come to horror games, because obviously that's how pretty much I was introduced to playing horror games, especially Resident Evil 1 and Silent Hill 1. I watched my cousin play it, so it's all that connection of sitting down with family and being scared together. it's almost that grounding of those memories of horror games.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. I was at a mate's house the first time I saw Resident Evil 2 and the introduction, and then like you saw they had the clip from the turning head zombie from one, and that kind of instantly drew me in as well. It's like that. Right, okay, I need to play this now.
Yeah.
You mentioned it taking over like 6 months or something to play. I think we played games a lot longer then, didn't we, as well? Because we obviously, as kids, we didn't have the disposable income to buy them ourselves, so we got a lot more out of them. I think time wise.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't play it, over and over. We were just playing, trying to, finish the game. But also there was a language barrier. My parents didn't know and still don't know English, and I obviously was a kid. So for us, it was just some random letters. There was a time when every game we played, we played with a paper solution. But
Okay.
but still, I had no idea was the like story of Resident Evil, like no idea at all. And it's funny that you mentioned. I mean, it's not that funny that you mentioned Resident Evil 1 or 2, but it's funny in the context of the story because when I was a kid, I didn't know that 3 is like the third entry in the series because all of the games I had 3, like Crash Bandicoot 3, I had Tekken 3, I had Resident Evil 3. Something else, I think. Heroes 3, I think. Like there was abundance of great games that were free, and I was just okay. That's their number for like good game. Like that's the symbol.
Yeah.
And I haven't played Resident Evil 1 for like I think I played it first time like 9 years ago or 8 years ago. The HD remake.
Yes, the
And
perfect
and
one.
I love Resident Evil 1 now. But yeah, I was into Resident Evil 3 because 3 that's the symbol for the greatest games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned survival horror specifically, so, and obviously that kind of ties into Holstin. But is that always going to be like out? You prefer that over things like psychological horror or kind of more action horror as a general rule? Then,
I mean, like I don't know the line to be honest. So Resident Evil 4 is obviously action packed game, and it's well regarded as one of the best, if not the best, survival horror ever. So like yeah, I don't know. So in terms of psychological horror, I mean Holstin is really psychological, and we describe it as psychological survival horror. Um, but I use survival horror as a genre, I guess, like fighting game.
Yeah.
I don't think so. A lot of survival horrors aren't really that much of a horrors, in my opinion, and they are certainly not survival games. So it's more of a just a term for games where you collect inventory stuff and shoot stuff and this kind of a horror in a way.
yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of crossover between the genres and stuff as well. I think, but people still probably have their own specific idea in their mind about when they use a specific term or what they mean. But that's probably a whole other discussion in and of itself, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious why we don't use the JRPG term. I kind of use it internally. Like we have RPGs and JRPGs for RPGs that came kind of from Japan, and it's kind of a different, Witcher versus Final Fantasy. Um, uh, it's a different genre, and kind of the horrors from Japanese developers like Resident Evil or Silent Hill are well obviously different than like I don't know Amnesia or horrors that are more like walking sims and or Outlast.
Mm.
So I feel like using. I mean, I know this term will not exist, but I feel like using J horror as a term within people that know what I mean describes best what I mean by survival horror.
Yeah, and that's very much where you see kind of Holstin in that space.
Yeah, I think so. Like, and again, the genres aren't that well defined, right? And but yeah, if I had to like put a sticker on that, I would say this is a J horror.
Okay.
Yeah. So for kind of the benefits of people who might not know already, who might be discovering your game for the first time from watching this, how would you describe Holston in terms of the story? Do you want to give us a bit of a kind of general overview for the newcomers?
Yeah. So one thing is that we haven't really, uncovered the story yet. There are two demos, and they don't feature a lot of the story. The general synopsis is that there's the town where your friend came and he, disappeared, and you have to go there and find him. And there's a lot of goo everywhere, a lot of different oozes, and people are behaving strangely or strange. But yeah, the story itself is a big part of the third demo that we'll be releasing later down the line. So it will be kind of unfair to really go really deep into that. For now, what we've been showcasing and like writing on is atmosphere of Holstin, is the setting of Holstin. So it all happens in the 90s, and it all happens in Poland, in a small town called Jeziorne Kolonia. And that's a big part of the story, but that's more of a narration than a story itself.
Yeah. So I mean, being set in the 90s, is that kind of more towards all the classic survival horrors were set in the 90s, or is that more about like kind of harking back to your own childhood in some sense?
Well, I've never really thought about all the survival horrors of the classic Spain in the 90s, to be honest. I'm just realizing that after you said that. That has a lot to do with the childhood and like knowing the period. Um, and so Poland has a specific um, that was a very specific period for Poland, as we've just fought off communism, and we were getting all those Western civilization things to us, but there were still a lot of, I think, like fear of the unknown. We were getting all those new toys and all those new economic systems, but we are also getting like companies from Germany, or we were getting like electronics that might have been scary, kind of. And also um, it's kind of a like I don't like to use this word because a lot of people are considering marketing as advertising, which is not. But being in the 90s is also part of our marketing in terms of our targeting the game to a lot of survival horror fans, a lot of Resident Evil horror fans, as we just spoke, are people that played those games in the childhood. And those people were in their childhood in the 90s. I was in my childhood in the 90s. So I feel like it's for the target for people that want to play such game as me. I really want to play final version of Holstin. I feel like the 90s are kind of, magically childhoody period that we look for in a nostalgic way. And nostalgia is a big part of Holstin, I would say. Like, we have modern technology in terms of tech art and like all those, I guess, things we'll be talking about with lights and shadows and camera switching and all that stuff. And it's a modern technology in terms of graphics, but it evokes a sense of nostalgia to the games that were back then. The games in the 90s didn't look like that, but it kind of feels like that, like they were.
Yeah. And I think that certainly when we've spoken to other developers as well, there's a lot of kind of trying to capture almost the essence or the spirit of that kind of era in terms of those games. Because there's something about whether it's fixed camera angles or the isometric viewpoints in your case. So what was the kind of inspiration for doing it the specific way you've done it? Like we got that kind of top-down isometric view for the exploration, and then as soon as you aim, you do the over-the-shoulder, which looks awesome. I imagine it's like technically quite difficult to do, but where did that come from?
Well, we didn't originally plan to do it. So at first, so Holstin was in the works in terms of like game design and prototyping, and in terms of like what game should we do next for basically a couple of years while we were doing other projects. And one of those, so at first it was supposed to be like the elevator pitch internally was Resident Evil, but a platformer in pixel art. And then we like expanded and we said, okay, we don't really know how to and how it will work as a like platformer game. I don't think it will really work, so let's do isometric pixel art game. And there's exploration, then there's like shooting and stuff, and not really only left or right like in classic platforming game. But we always knew we want to do all those technology things, all those lights and shadows and all that stuff that makes, I guess, Holstin unique in on the like pixel art spectrum. So the way to do those, the way to like display shadows is to make 3D models out of everything. Like
Yeah.
if pixel art of the table, let's say of a table has like two legs visible, then the system, the game doesn't know it actually has four legs. You have to have a 3D model that can render those legs in somewhere, and for the light to know that it has to cast four shadows or four legs. So we've been doing 3D for every pixel art. So we knew that from after we knew that we are going to make isometric game, then we knew that we want to have shadows and lights. So we knew that we are making 3D models, and if we were to do 3D models, then we were like, why don't we rotate the camera? We already have all those assets, all those pixel arts in eight camera angles. We have 3D models, so let the player rotate the camera. So it's fun, it's original. Let's do it. And that was Holstin for a long time, and then we sat down and prototyped combat mechanics. And we had, I think, 16 different or 14 different prototypes that were totally different. Like every prototype was something else. Like we had like quick time events. We had like targeting specific parts of the body, but still in an isometric view. We had like slow motion something.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was like typical isometric action-packed shooting. There was like Resident Evil 1 / Signalis game mechanics where you just point at something and shoot that. And there was this wild idea to just switch the camera and see how this works. And it didn't work at first. Like, so one thing is that technically it's a difficult thing, but gameplay wise, I wasn't really sure that this is something we want to pursue, and um, it was just some of the late night thought. Like I texted Bartek, which is our vice CEO and our tech artist, if he can make like prototype of this camera switch, just to see how it feels. And it didn't feel good. Like we we've had at the last stage we've had like 6 prototypes, and that was one of the like least promising ones. But we've worked on every of those 6 prototypes, and yeah, it's just at some point it felt amazing, and we thought, okay, fuck it, let's just do like it was a controversial decision, not only in a like for fan base kind of we we had a screenshot with like isometric combat, and we've had some people that wrote to me or to us and said that I thought the game will be different. I don't like it. And even internally, or I think the most internally, that was really controversial. Like a lot of people said it just won't work. That's too much work, and there's like motion sickness issues for sure. And yeah, but when we were at a certain level of the prototype, everyone was on board because that was gameplay wise, it was kind of the best of both worlds, and then it looked marketable. Like it looked like something that could be viral, and
Yeah.
it went viral. So yeah, that's the story of the camera switch.
Yeah. No, it's certainly very unique, and I think you can clearly see from what the community have come back from. They've really taken it up on and really celebrating it. So obviously, with you talked about all the different prototypes and stuff and different variations you've gone through. What have been the key inspirations game wise for the different prototypes of Holstin? Have you had any internally that you've taken key focus from?
You mean for the whole game, or the camera switch?
Like just for everything in general, really.
You know, so I mean, obviously, Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Those are like obvious inspirations we try to make.
Yeah.
I love Resident Evil series, and I love some Silent Hill entries, especially those on PSX. And I really like how the narration is done in Silent Hill, and that's kind of where we wanted to like merge those things. But it's hard to talk about inspirations, in a way that just those particular games. I said obviously because Holstin is the most similar to Resident Evil or Silent Hill, but there's we've all played hundreds of games, and we like some stuff and we don't like other stuff, and we take it all and try to make the best game we can out of everything we know. And some major inspirations that aren't games are TV series. So we've been really into and really inspired by Twin Peaks. I love Twin Peaks, and that's something that Twin Peaks isn't really scary. Twin Peaks isn't really that sci-fi or fantasy in its story, but its narrative is so, I don't know, like otherworldly, like different.
Yeah, it's very different and iconic, isn't it? And how it's shot and everything else visually, it's
yeah, and we we aren't inspired by Twin Peaks in a way that we want to have like tiled floor, white and black, or want to have the same scenes, but you were trying at least to evoke similar feelings that Twin Peaks. Sorry, that Twin Peaks bring to us, bring.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sense of like unease and slightly surreal.
Yeah,
It's, yeah,
and a lot of players, I mean, not a lot, but some players told us that it's similar to Twin Peaks. It makes them feel similar to Twin Peaks. Without us mentioning it in the like press releases or I don't know Steam page or something.
Yeah.
So at least in some way, we were able to. Be inspired by Twin Peaks, which is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And something I'm sure you haven't have heard about is a Polish series that I really recommend. And it's very recent. It's called Kruk, which is a raven in English. It's on HBO. It's by HBO.
Okay.
And Kruk is like a cop drama in Poland. It's kind of a Sherlock Holmes meets Twin Peaks, I guess.
Okay.
But it's neither of those. So
Yeah.
I really recommend Crook Brave on HBO to anyone that and it's really Polish in a way that it really shows the like superstition of the Polish communities in smaller towns, and we've been inspired a lot by Krug in that way, in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I think it's what's quite a good thing that's now coming up with all the different indie horrors and stuff is all the different cultures and atmospheres from obviously a lot of horror games are quite well established with the, like American locations or Japanese locations where as you've been talking about like 90s Poland obviously I don't think there's that many games at all that have been showcased, so it's great to have games that are showcasing all these different cultures and stuff from around the world.
Yeah, I mean, using Poland as a setting was a choice that we made on a couple different levels, and one thing was our familiarity with it, so we wouldn't have to do like a research for how the street lamp looks or how the typical house looks or village or whatever. But one of those things that we wanted to. So for me, Twin Peaks was also kind of otherworldly because like small town USA is out of this world for me. Like I've never really been in small town in USA, and I don't think I will ever be, especially in that time period. So we try to make Holstin as realistic in the world building as possible, and that makes I think kind of surreal. That makes Holstin kind of surreal for people that aren't that familiar with Polish culture, and for Polish people, for Poles, they love to see like cultural references, so it works either way.
Exactly.
And I felt the same with like Japanese stuff. Like I've played some games that take place in Japan, and I wasn't really sure if that's part of the game world building. Like they have something strange in the game. Is it like strange thing in the game, or is it just strange thing in Japan? And a lot of the times it was just strange thing in Japan. So yeah, I hope people will see that in Poland, and one thing they will feel strange because I want them to feel strange, and maybe they will also learn something here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big thing as well. Is it's you do learn a lot about the different cultures and different stories and folklores that typically won't get told. I think that's cool. And also another key thing about culture is obviously music. So in regards to Holstin, how have you tackled with the music and sound design of the game? Have you brought someone in, or have you been doing it yourself?
So in terms of sound design, I'm doing all the sound design. I'm recording all the enemy grunts and like here's a lamp that I've been hitting with this glass for like bullet hits metal thing sound.
Okay.
And in terms of music, so for the demos, there are some original music by my friend Piotr Surmacz, and some of the music is licensed but for the actual full release, we are finalizing a deal with a Polish band, fairly known band that will do the whole soundtrack. That's the first sentence. We are finalizing a deal with a Polish band that will make a full soundtrack for the game.
Okay, that's really cool. And hopefully that'll be released singularly, so you'll be releasing that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the band is, as I've said, fairly known in Poland, so that will be their album. This isn't. This will be an album made specifically for Holstin, but I guess they will be like touring with it. And
oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be interesting.
That'd be interesting because I think most game music, like you'd get like a live performance of it, like every once in a blue moon when something special's organized for it. So I suppose to have a band touring with game music is be like quite the novelty.
Yeah. So the thing about music in Holstin is, or just in general in horror. So the thing about music in horrors is that most of that is real generic, I would say. Like there's like this ambient, violin or some like breakbeat for like action-packed things, and it's fine. Like we will use those things for some things in Holstin. We'll have some ambience, and we'll have some, action-packed movie/game music. But for Holstin, in terms of like more cinematic moments, for more like introducing a new character, for like cutscene, for like being in a new place, or like important story moments, we will just have actual songs, I would say. So not typical game music.
So you mentioned earlier about obviously the community feedback that you've been getting as you've been putting out the different demos and making changes and stuff. There's been, I think, particularly since some of the stuff's gone more viral, as you said, there's been quite a lot of community support for the development. So does it feel good to have that, to like be building the game like kind of in tandem with the community rather than the community coming afterwards?
I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't really say that we are that close to the community. Like, I want to be close, whatever that means. And I hear all the feedback, and we read all the things, and we watch most of the videos. And we interact with people on Twitter or on our Discord and stuff. But it's because we went kind of public, because we Holstin became a fairly popular game. There was a lot of people that came to Holstin knowing just about the shooting gimmick. And there's a lot of people that expected Holstin to be something this is not. So one particular thing we have in Holstin is the stamina meter, which we call energy in game. And it depletes when you're aiming, it depletes when you're shooting, when you're kicking, dodging, and stuff. And while I do think, and we will be, while I do think it needs some tweaking, and we will be posting an update, I guess, when this talk will be live on YouTube, the update will be already there. But for a lot of people, this stamina meter was like too stressful, was like too, they would rather have a game where they can just shoot and not worry about resource management and that resource being stamina. And I feel like this is a big part of Holstin identity, and like being stressful and managing resource is a big part of Jake horrors. So if one thing is like managing ammo and then here's stamina, and we really like this system, and there's a lot of players that love it, but there's a lot of players that again told us the game would be much better if we would have less puzzles and more ammo and more or no stamina. And I guess yeah, I mean sure the game could be more fun for those people. I'm not saying it's wrong.
Mm.
They maybe could have a lot more fun in that instance. But yeah, I mean, we are making survival horror and not
Yeah.
like Duke Nukem game. It's not a boomer shooter. It's a survival horror where you shoot stuff. So the community feedback is twofold. Like at first, we were all really concerned about the first feedbacks that we got from the first demo. Now, for the second demo, we have around I think 6,000 like feedback forms at the end of the demo sent to us. But for the first demo, we had like 1,500 for like 6 months, and the first like 50 weren't that great. I mean, in terms of like feedback, a lot of people at first didn't like some things that were pretty integral to what the Holstin is, and we felt like maybe that's not a good game. Maybe that's not something that people will like. But a long time when more people found out about the game, and the game found people that want this kind of gameplay, this type of a game, we were getting good feedback that they loved the puzzles. Because again, the first demo, a lot of people that played the first demo were people that were into pixel art, that saw the GIF that we've sent, that we've posted, that you can rotate the camera in pixel art, and bless you, and a lot of people were just okay. That's a game where there's beautiful pixel art. Let me play this game, and there's environmental puzzles that aren't that hard, but yeah, there are some puzzles. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's always an interesting thing with survival horror, and partly because I know, like in kind of like popular news, like games media and stuff, that like they'll talk about any horror game that has combat as a survival horror, even though it's like more action and there's no puzzles in it and that sort of thing. But certainly there's always a conversation to be had with people who aren't used to that kind of game. And they're like, oh, well, why can't I just shoot and run and go on and do this? And no, well, that's not the kind of game it is. If you're trying to sell a Resident Evil or a Silent Hill or a Signalis or whatever else to someone, it's just like, no, well, the puzzles are part of it, and it's the exploration and but yeah, as much as I'd like everyone to have the same game tastes, yeah, I think a lot more people kind of do have probably skewed expectations of what games should be or shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, I really like what Resident Evil 4 Remake has done in terms of difficulty levels for puzzles. I think it's great that you can like lower the difficulty for puzzles, and kind of cater to people that aren't really into puzzles. I think that was a great remake, by the way, and but specifically about the catering to different kind of people. Resident Evil 4 is some I think is a great way. They went a great way to cater to some people that don't really like puzzles, but also to people that like the puzzles.
Yeah, I think they really took the feedback from, because obviously Resident Evil 4 was an incredibly heavy action horror, whereas now they've really added the action but also the horror aspect properly, so it can be played and experienced with a lot more people can experience it and like it from that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had the chance to play much? I mean, obviously we've mentioned Resident Evil 4, but in terms of other games that have come out this year, horror-wise.
I've played Dead Space for the first time recently. I believe it wasn't this year, right?
Yes, the remake was it you played?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That was January. That one.
okay. So this year,
Yeah.
and it was
It doesn't
first.
feel like less than a year ago.
Yeah. So that was the first time I played Dead Space, and I loved it. And that's why you can. I mean, it's not the main part of that, and I think this is the scheme for like cutting the limbs off of enemies. But that's where it came from, kind of like
Okay.
the inspiration for being able to do that in Holstin. Um, like not really, because we kind of knew that we want to have some kind of distraction, but Dead Space kind of cemented it. But yeah, I really like Dead Space in terms of being scary game. The last Resident Evil I think I was kind of scared in was the set. No, I wanted to say the Resident Evil 2, but the seventh was pretty scary. At, I mean, at least the like first half of it. But yeah, I was really focused on bringing the second host in demo. I don't think I played any horror games that released this year. Is there are there any particulars that you would ask me of? So was Signalis released this year?
Signal. Well,
That's
the physical release came out this year, but the
yeah.
actual original release was last year. So that won last year's horror game of the year from ourselves. We did. I'm trying to remember what the number was. That was we actually calculated how many horror games we knew of that had come out this year. Which,
Yeah, I added 7 more over the course of yesterday, from what I found. So we're
So
at 100.
were there the games released in this year or still to be released this year?
some are still to be released. They'll be released before
Yeah.
November, but we're on 130.
Yeah,
All right,
130
all right.
now, and then there's
So-
about another 70 to 80 that have yet to be released, which I think will obviously go into 2024. But
I
on our
mean,
current tally, we're
I
over 200.
know this is horror game awards, and I'm not sure how can you do it if you can. But is there any particular game you could recommend me from this year's releases that is a horror?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can recommend what we like. We don't get to we're not on the jury, so we don't get to make any nominations.
What
So we
was
can,
the game you have played lastly?
most recent one, it was a demo actually on Steam for Tenebrous Somnia.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yes,
Yeah,
that looks
it looks
insane.
amazing. Yeah.
The live action cutscenes in the middle of the 8-bit pixel art. That
I don't really follow a lot of games. I think I have like 50. I follow like 50 profiles on Twitter, but I immediately follow this one. The like it might seem a little ageistic, but I feel like or just wrong, but I feel like it has like the same DNA like Holstin, like old school pixel art game with a twist, I would say. And I'm in for that. I really liked it.
Oh, no, definitely the whole live action horror with that pixel art. I think it's a great merge, and obviously very unique as well, because I don't think anyone's ever done that before, as far as I'm aware.
Not that I can think. There was one. I can't remember what it was called, but last year it was like one of those point and click style ones, but it was like live action mixed with graphics, like you're in a hotel.
I mean, there were a lot of games way back where you've had your adventure games with live action cutscenes, or maybe not even live action, but like there were a lot of with like cinematic cutscenes that were kind of live action in contrast to how the games looked back then.
Yeah.
Recently I've seen 10 Dead Doves trailer. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
really like the trailer. I haven't played the demo yet.
No.
I talked briefly with the developers yesterday on Twitter messages. I just told them that the trailer looks really good. I will play it though. I just got back. I saw it yesterday, and I just got back from vacations yesterday. So I played, in the office as part of my job. But and I mean seriously, like as part of my job. But
yeah.
Yeah, I really like the trailer. Like that was one of the best trailers I've seen recently, and it's from a game that I've never heard about before.
Yeah.
And I've seen it just because they mentioned us. They mentioned Holstin in some response on Twitter. I was really impressed. So, like, head up. I mean, I guess greetings, big ups for the developers there.
Oh no, definitely. No, I think that's a really big thing within the horror genre at the moment. It's just I think over the past 5 years, it does seem to be in that upward trajectory where like really big indie horror is now making a big scene on everything, and trying to just track all these new horror games that are coming out. It just seems to be this infinite cycle of people being really inspired by what's coming. So long may it continue.
I mean, I think the most breakthrough was so back then it was Amnesia, I would say. Like that game really made rounds, or maybe Slenderman.
Yeah.
But and now we've had a couple games that like now I'm thinking back to like FNAF or just a lot of those games with huge following that are kind of horror, kind of, I don't know, social experiment for kids. I think you should cut it, but yeah. I'm really not into FNAF, but I really appreciate what they are doing with the fan service. Like that's obviously one of the best game in terms of how the narration is transferred through all the medias and but
I agree.
But what I want, so I want to start with Amnesia and go to Signalis, which is, and I guess sorry for mentioning all other games as not proper ones, but I think Signalis was the first proper indie game, and then by proper I mean with the full story and like looked amazing and played amazing and felt like it felt like a game. It felt like something that could come out of big studios.
Yeah,
way back then.
Yeah.
It didn't feel indie to me in any way. Obviously, it felt indie because no one would make such game now from a big studios or stuff. But it was so polished experience, and I was really into that. And I want. So it's funny because when we started making Holstin, we didn't know about Signalis at all, and I only heard about Signalis like 2 months before the release, or maybe 3 months before the release. And I was like, that's great. People will love this game because obviously it looks amazing. I'm sure it will be great. And I was really anticipating it to be great. And people will look, people will want more of that. And that's great for Holstin. There were some people that were asking us if it's not too similar to Signalis. Like obviously it's not. Like it's similar only that it's a horror, survival horror in isometric view sometimes. But it's great that people are like telling us that Signalis in Poland is that Holstin and Signalis in Poland because Signalis is a great game. I fucking love this game. Yeah. So that was the winner of your previous
yeah, it won last year. Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Literally, was it 5 or 6 out of the jury nominated it? I think.
Yeah. It was something like it was the most nominated one, and then
almost half.
Yeah, I think there was
So it's
Great,
there
great.
was there was a strong consensus.
Perfect game. I really love that. So, do you recommend any, game I should play? Um, I've
Yeah.
acquired a Steam Deck yesterday, so maybe something I could play on a Steam Deck.
See, I'm trying to think in terms of games I've played this year, other than the obvious one, Resident Evil 4. I've not got around to playing Dead Space yet.
No.
You meant the remake one?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I've not played any Dead Space, so that would be the first one either way.
No,
to be
I've
honest.
played them. Dead Space is 3, 1 and 2 is more ingrained in horror, and the third one is a bit more action. Because I think Dead Space 3 came out just after Resident Evil 4, so I think they took inspiration from the success of Resident Evil 4. So it's a bit more action horror, but it's a great story, and it's an absolute travesty that they didn't carry the story on.
Yeah, I really like
the ending of 3 is fantastic.
I really like the remake. Again, I didn't play the original, but it was kind of refreshing to see horror in something else than Village or something like that.
Yeah.
And like this game is actually scary. I used to play. I mean, I play games on like the hardest difficulty, just for, especially horrors, just to be scared of dying. And I was really scared of dying. Like,
Yeah.
And that was the first game, I think. Now there's a couple more I've seen when I'm like noticing that. But we had this. So when we were developing the first demo, we were talking about black. So in horror, you have a lot of black, but in most cases, especially in games, it's not like black. You can see some silhouettes, you can see some things in the lack of light, and we were debating of what color to use for black and color to use for black, but we were debating how visible should be things that aren't in the light and stuff. And Dead Space makes a great use of light. They have some great, light designers, and a lot of the time the game is almost pitch black, apart from some things you have to go towards. And that primal fear of dark is really present in the game. Like, I was genuinely scared that there might be an enemy in the dark, and that is something I really often don't feel. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever felt that before and after. I don't think there was ever a game that I played and I actually Outlast. Outlast was another one that I was scared of the dark.
Yeah.
But for a game that you can like shoot stuff and is action packed, and you have like 10 different weapons, that was generally one of the or only game that I was actually afraid of enemies, and that's a great feat. Like, I really appreciate people that did that.
Another one that did a lot with like the dark space. I haven't played it all yet. I played a short segment of it. I need to actually get back into it. But the newest Amnesia, the bunker. There's something about World War One as a setting for horror as well. It's got to be said. But yeah, there's a lot, especially because you have this one wind up light, which runs out very, very quickly, and it like illuminates a very small space in front of you. So if the generator's not on, you're basically in pitch black except for this one bit, and then turning on the light makes this huge racket, which might attract the monster that's hunting you and stuff as well.
Played only like a couple of minutes, to be honest, and I've left it for like a fall. But how long is the game?
Like I say, I've not actually finished it yet. I played it for an hour and then kind of other stuff got in the way. But Well, I think Will's looking it up now to see how long it is.
Its average is 4.5 hours.
How long to beat?
That's 4.5 hours to beat.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're checking on the website how long to beat, because I always when I see something X hours on how long to beat, I always estimate that is X plus like 30%. I like that kind of triggers me. Like why do people like tell that they finish the game in less? I'm really sure that they finish the game in less than the average on how long to beat. Like not every game, the average gamer isn't a pro gamer. Like that's for sure. So I don't know if they like. I don't know. I don't know, man. This really triggers me. Like, is it not consistent with your playthroughs of the game? Like I've never been. I'm I'm a fairly good gamer. I've beaten Dark Souls. I don't know, and a lot of different hard games.
Yeah.
And I've never finished a game on much longer time than it is on how long to beat. So yeah.
I like to kind of take my time on a first playthrough as well, and that's the playthrough where you kind of see as much as you can and explore all the corners before you get to the point where you've optimized everything and you just go, right, go this way, go this way, go this way.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but I mean, even if you, so there is this main story plus extras, and there's main story or 100, and I feel like okay, main story is okay, main story, but if someone tells me that main story plus extras on like Breath of the Wild is 50 hours average, then I don't know what game they played. Like, it's not. It's not. I finished the first playthrough of Breath of the Wild in like 170 hours. I haven't done everything. I was looking for stuff to do for the last like 20 hours.
Yeah.
But average isn't like 60 hours for like main story plus extras. That's like, not a speedrun level, but that's too short to play the game. Yeah, is there anything else you want to chat about?
Well, I think we've probably covered most of the stuff in terms of Holstin, unless there was anything more you wanted to say in terms of what the future of the game looks like in terms of plans for things coming up.
In terms of inspirations, and we've talked about like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and I've been talking about like narration and like game mechanics, but we and that wasn't like conscious decision, but we are really inspired by, I think again that wasn't conscious, but the game is similar in progress to Silent Hill, as you will be traversing, as a player will be traversing a fairly big town of Jeziorno Colonia, and it's a semi-open world where doing investigative stuff, and you're trying to find your friend Bartek and trying to find out what happened.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited for you. I mean, you as Will and Phil, and you as people that listen or watch this video, to generally for the families to try the third demo. Like I'm genuinely really excited for you to tell me what you think about our story progress. Like I feel that when we've shown the first demo with the like rotating camera, and then the first and then like story and puzzles and stuff, and then the second demo where there was like this camera switch and stuff. I feel that the third demo has the most. I'm not sure what's the word in English, but in Polish, literal translation would be cards to show. Like we'll still have. I feel the last word to say. Like the game really isn't really shown yet. Like the game is about traversing the town. The game is about finding clues in the town. The game is about getting to know Jeziorna Kolonia. Just as Silent Hill was about traversing the town and getting lost in the mist. Like I don't know if
I'm figuring out the mystery that's all developed in there.
yeah. Like I don't know if you've also been what's the lost. I don't know if you've also been lost in the mist, but I was like 6 when I played Silent Hill first, and I was really lost in the game. I have no idea what I was doing, and again, I didn't know English, so for me that was the most strange thing ever. I was like, there's a mist, there's like pterodactyl that's attacking me, there's a police lady. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine the piano puzzle in that.
Yeah, I don't really remember how. I remember that I finished the game, but I guess that was paper solution. Just go there, do that stuff, and it was still hard for a 6 years old, and really creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well.
I mean, what do you? So my question to you: what do you feel about, and how do you feel about introducing children horror?
I think it's a weird one because I know like friends who've got kids now. Like I have to be very careful what games I play around them. It's like everything that I normally play goes by the wayside. And it's Minecraft and Fortnite has to go on instead. But at the same time, like when I was young, like in that sort of age, like I think I was younger than 10 when I first watched Terminator 2 with my parents. And like I got into a lot of horror games, possibly because my parents didn't know what the games were about. They just thought, oh, computer games.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can kind of see both sides of it. I think being introduced to it young kind of definitely inspired like a lifelong love of horror and all things scary, like from movies, books, games. But I can also potentially see why parents might not necessarily want the children exposed to that. I don't know.
No, because in my main job I work around with children education, so I know of the impacts of what I've experienced when I was younger. And I think the thing is, it's when we were young, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't this huge knowledge about video games in general. It was just a case of put it on, there you go, I'll buy it, there you go. And I think it's a really hard one because you hear kids talking today about playing like Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty and stuff and seeing some really horrific things. And I don't know, it's a really hard one because I think if they're brought up in the right environment, there's a huge boundary, isn't there, of what you can do. But from our experience, our horror wasn't really in-depth, highly graphic horror. Like
it wasn't photorealistic.
Exactly. We had the comedic, like the sort of humor side of things. Now, when we look back at Resident Evil and how like the voice acting and everything else looked, whereas now it's literally pinpoint. Yeah, like you couldn't differentiate it from pictures, from like crime scenes and actual really bad things happening. So I think that side of it, given to children, is obviously going to be the right thing now.
I mean, I think that's the point, but I'm not sure in the like photorealistic thing. Like thinking about how you're telling about like our horrors weren't so graphic. I feel like graphic is not the perfect word. Like our horrors weren't so developed. Our horrors weren't as good in being a horror as some of the games are right now. Like I would consider Resident Evil 3, the original one, much less scary or like mature game than like The Last of Us 2. Like I really wouldn't show a child The Last of Us 2 game because it's dark, it's hard.
Yeah, no, it's very, very.
And for like I played GTA 2 religiously as a kid, and all my friends in elementary school played GTA 2. We were just, getting into cars and just crashing into like things. It wasn't about like human drama. When
No,
when
no, no.
when we like killed someone, that was like killing whatever, like goblin, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you have like again like Dead Space, where I'm generally scared. 30 years old, and maybe I don't have children myself yet, but I wouldn't like I would show my children, obviously not like 2 years old, but there are whole horrors that I could maybe introduce my children, like stuff, let's say, or
Exactly. Yeah.
kind of like Deltarune is kind of a horror. I mean, I would say horror for children, but I wouldn't consider it a game for children.
No.
It's but it can be scary for children.
Definitely.
And there are some like Ring was too scary for me as a child. Like I was really afraid of the TV for like a week. I was scared to go near it. I mean, I went, but not when there was dark outside.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe some horrors are just horrors, but some games that aren't horrors, like The Last of Us 2, which is good. I had to like think about it for like 2 days when I finished that.
Yeah.
Isn't really a horror, but it's
It's
really
horrific.
Yeah. Got horror, huge horror elements.
Yeah. Because I think there's a thing that can be said as well where we experience these horror games. Well, I know in my case, and a lot of the stories that you do here, is that it's a shared experience where you're sharing it with people. And I think with technology nowadays, and literally you can now play Resident Evil 4 remake on an iPhone, like I think that's the more scary side of things, where we could share and talk about it. I think that's the more safe. Like if you're going to share it with someone.
Okay. Can you explain it more? What you mean by that?
So like now with like being isolated, so obviously a lot of people can be on their own. So when you play a horror, when I find playing a horror by myself in the dark, it really amps up the horror aspect and it scares you more, ingrains in your memory more. Whereas the horror games that I played as a child, I played with my friends. So that experience and what I intook was different because obviously we all have different variations of how scared we are by different things. So when you're with someone who is not as scared of it, you are psychologically less scared of it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree on that. But do you think that what's the how does it kind how is it connected with introducing children to horror? Do you mean that
I think like we couldn't really stumble upon it, whereas now children nowadays they can load up anything on any device.
Oh, okay, sure.
And they could see, oh, I want to play this game that's just come out on the shop, and all of a sudden it's this horrific thing.
I mean, there are parental control things that you can do to block certain things on Steam.
Yeah.
And when I was young, I was literally afraid to click that I am over 18 or 13 years old to access some internet forum about Yu-Gi-Oh. There was I say that I am 13 years old or higher, and I was like, I clicked that, but I turned off the website immediately because I was afraid that police will come. They will know somehow that I was 11, or maybe 9.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you can have like filters, but you
Yeah.
know, if you don't watch, I think, but if you don't watch what your child is doing in a way that they can play a horror game that isn't suitable for them, then playing a horror game that isn't suitable for children isn't the worst thing that they can do on the internet if you're not paying attention to them.
Oh no, definitely.
So yeah, that, and again, that is, I understand you two are also childless, so that is maybe a debate for people with
totally.
children.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I will say I think is quite interesting is that there's a couple of games that have come out this year which have kind of, well, they're definitely in the horror area, but they've marketed themselves as like kind of suitable for either younger audiences or people brand new to horror as kind of like a stepping stone. So one of them is a platformer called Full Void, which has got like quite horror dystopian elements, but it's very much like a child could play that. There's no issue with any of that in terms of that. And then there's also Guilt, GYLT, which is
that's
like a kind
a full void. I was
younger survival horror.
into the game. But the Guild, I don't know.
GYLT. I think that because they're releasing their game physically. I think later this month. I think, but it came out earlier this year.
Oh, it looks nice.
Yeah. Oh no, visually it's a very good game. It does. It's got a great story as well.
But again, this type of game is like a children's horror kind of. Like I don't know. I haven't played it. But for like children's horrors, you have like Tim Burton's movies that are like horrors, but Edward Scissorhand isn't really that scary. But it's a children's horror. Or you have I'm not sure how it's named in English, but like the stop motion movie of Tim Burton's.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
That's a different game. I mean, that's a different movie that is also Corpse Bride.
Yes, yeah.
So that's another like horror for children. And then you have games that are again kind of a gateway. So like Limbo, I would say.
Limbo.
Game maybe Little Nightmares. It's a dark game that if you are into the story, if you like understand the story, it's about cannibalism and like being a slave or a prisoner. It's not light, but you can play it with a child, maybe like 10 years old, maybe 12 years old. It's not something that isn't like in Disney movies, or just movies in general. There are bad people in movies or on TV.
Yeah. Probably more akin to like the older Disney movies where they were a lot darker, kind of like the old. Like Snow White and Pinocchio.
Some of the older ones are really dark. I have to go, but it was great speaking to you. Do you have? I don't know what's the procedure to end those. So, do you have any procedure to
finish? No, that's fine. It's been a really interesting discussion. I think before we go, just to mention to everyone watching that if you want to check out Holstin, we'll be linking the Steam page down in the description. So do check it out, and there's a demo there to play, which you definitely should give a go. Other than that, thank you very much, Rafał, for talking to us. It's been a pleasure. It's been very interesting.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure too. Again, thanks for having me.
No worries.
And we'll catch everyone on the next one. Cheers.
Bye.
This has been Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. Thank you very much for listening. Check out the links in the description for more info on where to follow our guests in order to support them and keep up to date with their work. The Horror Game Awards will be airing live on YouTube on Saturday 16th of December. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel to avoid missing out on what promises to be a very exciting night of awards and game reveals, as well as future episodes of this podcast and other content. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.